Actually looking forward to it. It's a fun time of year for sure to get it going again with the Eagles season. And then really for me and Neil Writers, that begins at training camp.
Well, it does, and it is a fun time of the year. And this year is really, when Chip got here 2 years ago, it was like, all right, what's it going to look like? How's this all going to look? That was the big thing. Last year, you had a little bit better indication. And now in year number 3, a complete changeover here. And as you wrote, there's you have 10 things that could be the reason why the Eagles could be a dumpster fire this year. But, I mean, do you, for the most part, think that the Eagles, these things would be, were you stretching to get 10? I mean, does this look like, in your mind, into the third year that this team's going to be pretty good?
Yeah, I think they're going to be a good team. And I did like a dumpster fire series for the entire NFC East. I did the Redskins, Cowboys, Giants, and Eagles. So really, I was just picking apart everything that I could in terms of what could go wrong for each of those teams. I didn't point out any good stuff, but certainly the Eagles have a lot of things going for them. In that article, in terms of did I have to stretch to get to 10? A little bit. There was one in there about the Eagles having the youngest group of wide receivers in the NFL. If in fact you do think that Matthews, Aguilar, and Huff are going to be their 1, 2, 3, I actually think they're going to be good this year. So, there could be some growing pains there, but that was one that was a little shaky. And then one of them I was just making fun of Heath Evans, where I said they don't have a fullback. So, I think I had 8 strong ones in there.
Well, yeah, and some of the ones that I definitely want to get your opinion on is number one, the offensive line. This is a offensive line that's changing over. There wasn't a lot of depth last year. There's almost no depth this year. Is that offensive line a legitimate concern?
Oh, my God, yeah. Yeah, of course it is. I mean, they cut their 2 guards this offseason. And, Herremans is getting older, and Herremans was clearly in decline. So I get that. And Mathis, I don't know exactly what went on there in terms of him and Chip Kelly and whether, personal things got him cut, or really if it was just a matter of, he was making too much money and the Eagles didn't want to pay him as much as he was making, or, whether he was really demanding, more money as the Eagles said. So it's a little unclear, but clearly, in my opinion, they're better with him than without him, because what you do now is what they have now is they have 2 new guards in there, and on that entire offensive line, when you look at any one of those players, they've played almost no snaps whatsoever to the guy, or next to the guy to their left or to their right. So you plug in a guard in between that, a new guard in between that left tackle and that center. You plug in a new right guard in between that right tackle and that center, and you just have no more O-line cohesion. Whereas Mathis and Herremans were part of that Eagles offensive line for the last 4 or 5 years. So in terms of filling in new guys, I really don't think that the drop off from Mathis to Barbary is necessarily going to be a big killer. But what you do is you take your best reserve offensive lineman in Barbary, and a guy who can play 4 different positions. Now he's starting, and you take another guy off the bench now, whether it's Matt Tobin or Andrew Gardner or Dennis Kelly or the new guy that signed Moffitt. Whether out of those 4 guys who's going to start at right guard. Now you're taking another reserve and you're putting him in the starting lineup, and you're really just depleting your depth there. So I think they have problems in terms of O-line cohesion and continuity, and then of course just if somebody goes down, especially at the tackle position, I mean they're screwed. It's like they lose Jason Peters, they're in big time trouble. And Lane Johnson to a lesser degree, but I mean because they just really don't have anyone that they can fill in at that tackle spot.
Yeah, Jimmy, and the offensive line last year, a lot of people talked about them changing from a more athletic second-level line to the more power-running style. I guess them changing the line indicates there will be a change in the running style, the running attack.
Well, clearly with the running backs themselves, I think that's true. Where you go from LaShawn McCoy, who is dynamic, shifty, and just obviously a very good player here with the Eagles for a long time and could make guys miss, to more of hammers in a guy like DeMarco Murray who gets north-south and puts his head down and runs guys over, and the same kind of player in Ryan Matthews. So, again, is a bigger guy who has some speed and just head down and will try to run you over. So, the different I think it's going to be a different style of run game than we've been used to seeing. And again, for me, I think it really starts with the actual running backs themselves.
Jim mentioned that the Eagles receiving core among the youngest in the NFL. Now, it used to be 3 years. You got to wait for these receivers. We've seen that change over the last couple of years. But because they're the youngest, does that mean that they're, do you look at this team as a better core than even last year's team?
Well, those receivers, first of all, the two guys in particular, Aguilar and Matthews, I think are both, mature beyond their years. So I don't really think of those two guys as your typical rookies. I think Aguilar's going to step in day one and start and actually be productive right off the bat. And, of course, we saw Matthews last year go for, 800-plus yards, 8 touchdowns, I think. And I think he's going to have bigger numbers this year as well. So I think they'll be okay at that wide receiver position. One of the question marks will be Josh Huff and whether he can produce in a potentially expanded role in 2015, or if he just kind of won't beat out some of the guys that are already in place, like Riley Cooper or maybe a guy like Miles Austin. So, that remains to be seen. But I do like what they have there in terms of their youth at wide receiver. They can kind of all grow together and kind of gel with, if Bradford sticks around for more than a year or two, then maybe they can build some rapport with him. But certainly they have a lot. They have a lot to look forward to at that wide receiver position.
I like number 7 on your list. The Eagles had the triple crown of turnover awfulness, but it is a legitimate thing that can they really turn the ball over as much as they did? But I guess on the flip side, you can say, can they really make teams turn the ball over as much as they had? Their defense was really, special teams and defense was a big coup for them early in the year, but I would imagine that they have to cut the turnovers down. You can't assume that there are going to be 36 turnovers again.
Yeah, I think that turnovers, a lot of people see turnovers as sort of luck-driven, and I don't buy that, really, especially when you look at it in terms of are you turning the ball over or not. I think, the best teams in the league with the best quarterbacks in the league just don't turn the ball over that much. And, the Eagles got bad quarterback play, in my opinion, last year, and I think a lot of their skill position players were kind of sloppy, holding the football. Sean McCoy was one guy who, just held the ball way away from his body. Huff had a fumble or two, and he just had way too many interceptions, both out of Foles, who had his interception total increase, obviously big time from 2013 to 2014. Sanchez had a lot of turnovers as well. At 36, I think overall, they led the NFL both in total turnovers, in interceptions, and in fumbles lost. So that's where you get the triple crown of turnover awfulness. So I just don't think it's completely luck-driven. I think it's something that they have to kind of change their mindset and really just be better about not being sloppy. They did a good job of it in 2013, and then they really regressed last year. So I think that's obvious. And, when you talk about turnovers, I think, like, some of the laziest analysis that you see before, any games, it's all going to come down to the turnover battle, and you can say it about any game. But the reality is the Eagles do really have to limit the turnovers that they had last year for sure.
And that goes to number 3, 11 defensive and special teams turnovers. I guess you can't go into a season banking on getting double-digit touchdowns from your defense and special teams.
Yeah, their special teams are just amazing last year, both in the return game. They blocked a ton of punts. They're getting, touchdowns off punt blocks. They're getting, they got a decent number of touchdowns from their defense too. Forcing fumbles on against the quarterback, and to get 11 on a season is an insane number, and that's just not going to happen again. So I think those touchdowns sort of skewed the numbers a little bit in terms of their points per game. It makes their offense look a little bit better than it really was. Because again, they're not going to approach 11 special teams and defensive touchdowns in 2015.
No, and you wonder how many of those 11 touchdowns help them win a game that they might not have won.
Yeah, that's a good question. They actually got a bunch of them, they got 3 against the 49ers, and they lost that game. Malcolm Jenkins had one. Sproles had a punt return. I forget who had the third one in that game, but that's where all their points came from in that game. The offense was essentially shut out. The offense had done 1. So that was one game where, those touchdowns sort of went to waste. But clearly that special teams unit, in my opinion, was the best in the NFL. And I think that special teams unit is still going to be really good again in 2015. You really just can't expect the same kind of results that you got last year.
Jimmy Kempski, PhillyVoice.com. He covers the Eagles. And, on the defensive side of the ball, there were so many times. You talk about they couldn't get up the field, the third downs. they tried to fix that this offseason, but you would say, well, there's on the field so much. If they can cut that down, they tried this offseason. We'll see if it works, but that also factors in. If they give up big plays like they did, if they didn't improve that secondary with what they did, it's going to be another long year for the defense.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up the third most pass plays of 20-plus yards in NFL history last year. And, obviously their secondary was a big part of that with Bradley Fletcher and, Kerry Williams, those guys giving up some big plays. And Nate Allen was certainly a culprit in some of those as well. So you replace Nate Allen, you replace Kerry Williams, you replace Bradley Fletcher, and we'll see how it goes in 2015. I think they're going to really kind of adjust their scheme a little bit so they're not beating over the top as much as they were last year. That number is certainly going to come down, in my opinion, in terms of the number of plays that they give up in 2015. So that'll help a little bit, but that's certainly an area where they have to improve without question.
Any thoughts on Maxwell? I mean, you saw a little bit of him, but a lot of people think that he was the best player at that position. You get a good feeling that he is a significant upgrade over what they had, and I know he better be. He better be, but. Do you get the feeling that he is a legit? Does he look like a legit guy? Does he have that swagger?
Yeah, I like him. And swagger is a good word, actually. I was going to say that in the OTA and mini camps that we attended, I thought he looked like a confident player. And I talked to some Seattle writers about him, and they all said he's completely legit. Now, the concern that comes with Byron Maxwell is that he's playing across from Richard Sherman, which actually I think hurts him because that makes, quarterbacks are going to challenge Maxwell, of course, far more than they're going to challenge Sherman. But then you have those two really good safeties in Seattle and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. And the Seattle guys kind of were of the thinking that, Maxwell really held his own there. And they didn't really think that he was a huge beneficiary of those safeties on the back end. So I think he's going to certainly be an upgrade over both Kerry Williams and Bradley Fletcher. Did they overpay him? Yeah, I think they did, but they kind of had to out of necessity. Either have cornerbacks or you see what happened last year with the Eagles and the number of huge plays that they gave up. So I think it was the right move bringing him in, even if they had to overpay him a little bit.
All right, I like number 2. Can you explain a little better for the listeners? The offensive production, very misleading. Most people just think Eagles offense, don't worry about it, but is their production a little misleading?
I don't want to get too much into hyperbole here, but I think that the Eagles' offense is probably the fastest-paced offense maybe in the history of the NFL. Not sure about that, but certainly they run at an enormously fast pace. And as a result, they run more plays than any other team in the NFL. And also as a result, the defense faces just, as many plays as any other defense is going to face in the NFL. So when you're playing, when you have far more snaps on offense than you have than all the other teams around the league, you're going to have really skewed statistics. So they're in the top 10 in points, in yards, in passing yards, and in rushing yards. So, across the board, they're in the top 10 there. However, I think the better measuring stick for a team like the Eagles, where they are running that fast pace, is points per drive and yards per drive. And in both of those two categories, they're really sort of more in the middle of the pack. I think they were 13th in points per drive and somewhere right around there as well in yards per drive. Now that puts them more on an even playing field with the rest of the offenses around the league. Now like I said before, they were they had the most turnovers in the NFL. So you go, okay, well maybe they have more turnovers because they have more snaps on offense. And actually, not really, because they're dead last in the NFL in turnovers per drive as well. They're dead last 32nd there as well. So they are turning the ball still at a higher rate, even though they are playing a lot more snaps. So by playing more snaps and having more drives, and when they score quickly. But when they go out, when they go 3 and out, they go 3 and out quickly. So they're punting quickly. And what that does is it gives the opposing team certainly more drives as well, and gives them more opportunities to put up points. So if you're going to run that really fast-paced offense, you got to capitalize on the drives that you have. I just don't think they're scoring as efficiently as a lot of people think they are.
Jimmy Kempski, PhillyVoice.com. Good stuff. And then finally, the quarterback situation. I mean, if you got a guy that you're banking on, do you think they are banking on him? I guess not. If you had brought back Sanchez, they're not banking on him, but would it be a big disappointment for them if Bradford didn't play?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, they traded their existing starting quarterback, a second-round pick. they're paying him $13 million. So, yeah, of course. I mean, I think it'd be a major disappointment if he didn't play this year. And he's going to be the starting quarterback unless he's hurt or unless it's just so lopsided or Bradford is just so bad during training camp and Sanchez looks really good. I don't think there's really any way that they're not going to start Bradford again because of all the things that they gave up to get him and what they have sort of invested in him.
What do you make of Bradford not signing? Is this kind of a surprise? Not really? Or did you think that would be the way it ended up going?
Yeah, it's not really a surprise at all. Bradford really has he really has, not much of an incentive to take a team-friendly deal that the Eagles throw at him because, first of all, he's loaded. I mean, he was the last first-round pick before the new CBA where he got paid. I mean, those guys back before the new CBA would get absurd dollars, coming out of college. And, so he's loaded already, and he can sort of afford to bet on himself this year. He can go through the season. He's getting, like you mentioned before I came on, he's making $13 million. So you have that $13 million. If they're not going to give you more than that and they're not going to give you stability and a lot of guaranteed dollars going forward, then play it out. And like I already mentioned, the Eagles' statistics are going to be, kind of skewed positively toward any kind of quarterback that plays in their system anyway. So he's in a great position to sort of put up numbers and maybe artificially perhaps. And if the Eagles want to re-up him to a big, huge guaranteed money contract, then maybe he'd be amenable to it. I don't know why the Eagles do that until they actually see what they have. And if he plays well, then he can certainly hit the open market as well and kind of have a lot of other teams bidding on his services. So, he's in a position where he's not going to take anything that isn't a great deal, and the Eagles would kind of be dumb to give him a huge deal that they can't get out of with a lot of guaranteed money before they see what they actually have.
Yeah, and we'll see. Obviously, do you have any indication? They're 2 weeks away. He said if he's not ready for training camp, something's gone wrong. Any indication that he will not be ready?
Not yet. I mean, once we get into training camp and if he's not taking as many reps as maybe we've been accustomed to see the quarterbacks take, then maybe there's something to it. But for now, I mean, I don't know what we really were expecting in OTAs and minicamp, but he was playing, he was out there, he was throwing, moving around a little bit better than he was toward the tail end of those minicamps than he was at the beginning of them. So there was some sort of progress there. And I think it's just kind of wait and see at this point. When we get on the field, we actually get to see him throw and move around a little bit, and evaluations will be a little bit easier then.
All right, Jimmy Kempski, 2 weeks from camp. The Eagles, very interesting team as they get ready to knock off the Cowboys. 12-4. The Cowboys were the defending NFC champs, NFC East champs, and no Eagle playoffs last year. Jimmy Kempski over at PhillyVoice.com. All right, bud, we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.